And any audit of our database would show this. We don't allocate fractions, and certainly don't do any switching or deletion of these votes.
So when the ranked voting occurs in the states that do allow that, is there a fractional vote count that comes out in those situations, or is it still whole numbers?
No, so the report that I happened to see in, it was, I think, another hearing in your state, and it was attributed to our system. I can tell you that's false, and I haven't seen any report of where that report came from. It looked like it was just created on PowerPoint. I can tell you that does not come from any report on our system. And that's something any one of your counties that use our system could verify for you. In the states that do use ranked choice voting, it is a separately installed module with separate training. And the telltale sign of whether or not it's on is you look at the ballots. So beside Senator McBroom's name on a ballot, there might be, if it's a vote for 5, there might be 4 different columns. So I could vote for you as my first choice or my second choice, third or fourth choice. The rules on this vary in the jurisdictions that use them. But again, it is not allowed for use in Michigan. It has nothing to do with Michigan. It wasn't used for Michigan. And that's something that can be easily and independently verified.
So on with the fractional voting issue, since you bring this up, and I would have, if one of the other committee members hadn't, I've seen a page that appears to be a screenshot that demonstrates fractional votes. And at the bottom of it, it says Dominion software. Is there any screen in your software that would allow that to happen? And if not, then where did this come from?
Absolutely not. It does not come from our software. Our reports typically don't have from Dominion software on the bottom of our reports. Our reports can be obtained through the Secretary of State's office or counties that use our systems. And as to the all-important question of where that screenshot came from, to me it looked like it was an actual PowerPoint report. Your guess is as good as mine. All I can tell you is it did not come from our system.
I'm going to go back slightly, and it's not that I won't come back to fractional voting, but I'm going to mull over what you said, and perhaps we'll come back from a different angle. But you were mentioning how in the post-election, your software, the machinery is audited by the EAC or potentially by a third party, correct?
Yeah, the federal process specifically requires it to be thoroughly tested, including source code review, accuracy test, volume test, environmental test. It's very comprehensive. The manual is thousands of pages of long, the requirements.
Why doesn't Dominion do some of its own auditing of the systems at the completion of the election afterwards? I mean, do you come to any of the counties, take back machinery or software and reevaluate how it performed yourself?
That's a great question, Senator. The whole system is designed so that no voter needs to blindly trust any individual company, that doesn't need to blindly trust any individual technology or any individual poll worker. So the role of auditing and testing prior and after the system is best not done by the company that provides the actual technology in the first place. It is best done by the election officials whose accountability is to run the elections under their total control, and best done by independently accredited experts from a bipartisan federal committee that reviews everything from competence on the technical and the procedural side as it pertains to elections. And so that's why we don't audit our own software. Now, to the question of do we test our software? Absolutely, we test our software very, very thoroughly, but that happens completely independent of any customer jurisdiction or the certification lab. This is generally something that we do very extensively prior to submission to the federal government for federal certification.
How would your company know then if there were issues with the interface ability, with customer satisfaction in regards to the performance of the software. What do you do to receive feedback on how well the program works and how well it interfaces?
Well, it's an iterative exercise through continued conversations, collaborative in nature with our customers that use our software and systems.
And now turning my attention, and I'm sorry to kind of bounce around here a little bit on you.
No, no worries.
When we look at the Antrim report that's recently come out, there's specifically notes regarding the absence of logging within the steps of the adjudicated ballots. You went through for us what the adjudicated ballot is and what that entails, but where you mentioned there's both an automated and a non-automated system for adjudication. Which one is it that Antrim County had, and where are these logs that the report that came yesterday says are missing?
There's no automated process for adjudication. The two different systems are one that is manual in nature, that requires local bipartisan adjudication committees to remake new paper ballots based on mistakes that they agree on that a voter who is voting absentee have made. And the second is the same process, but instead of remaking a paper ballot, they make their selection and their determination electronically that is attached to the original image. And so Antrim County used the manual process. They do not license the digital adjudication software. And we know for a fact that they could not have used it because they did not record absentee ballot images, which is a prerequisite to use a digital adjudication.
So in my township, and I'm part of a small township, and by the way, just for the record, because I'll get in trouble later if I don't correct you, Antrim County is downstate, not in the UP. It's close to the UP, but it's downstate.
Fair enough. As you might have surmised, Senator, I have not been to Antrim County. It's on my to-do list to visit Antrim County.
It's a beautiful place. I hope you'll get the chance. Regardless, so in my precinct, I don't see any computers there at all. I mean, there's one tabulator. And so does that mean then that if they need to do adjudication of ballots there for an absentee ballots, they're going to have a manual process then, correct?
That's correct.
If a place has a digital process, they would have to have a computer there that interfaced with the tabulator?
That's correct.
Okay. And so are those networked? Is the computer then networked directly to the tabulator on a local area network?
The systems are designed to be closed networked, which means they are connected to each other in a local area network, but they are not designed to be connected to the outside world through either an internet connection or any other external connectivity device.
Is there something, though, that would prohibit that from occurring?
I'm sorry, is there something that would prohibit connectivity to occur? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, if the locals were to have that computer connected to the World Wide Web and also networked to the tabulator, is there something in the software that would shut things down at that point? Would it continue to operate? What is the security protocol at that point?
Well, first and foremost, the physical security that is under complete control of the election official is paramount. And there's no adjudication that ever happens at a polling place. One of the audits that an independent test authority accredited by the EAC can perform is a test to look at whether or not that computer was connected to the internet, which of course it's designed not to.
I thought that you might have just said that adjudication doesn't take place at the polling place, but I'm not sure. Is that what you meant to say? Because
Yes.
I mean, isn't that where, if there's a ballot with an overvote, isn't that adjudication going to take place there at the polling place?
Okay, fair enough. So I
Okay.
did say that. So let's take a couple steps back to make sure we're on the same page.
Please.
In a county like Antrim or your county, where they are using a a manual adjudication process. Adjudication does not happen at the polling location. Adjudication happens only as it pertains to absentee ballots that are received at whatever location that county may be processing the absentee ballots that come in. So the county runs their independent process in verifying the absentee ballots that come in, verifying voter eligibility per whatever rules they have, and then the ballots are then processed, usually, and to my knowledge, exclusively at a centralized location that is physically controlled by, in every respect, by the local election officials. So in a county such as Antrim, the adjudication would have been done by hand. Any paper ballots that needed to be adjudicated would have been done by taking a problem ballot, if there was agreement by the adjudication board, and taking a brand new blank ballot and making the marks that the panel agreed to. They would put the actual ballot somewhere else for keeping, and then the ballot that they made would be the one that would be scanned. In the case of Antrim, and I strongly suspect your home county as well, that scanning would have happened through a polling place tabulator, but not at a polling place. So in the case of Antrim, what I just learned the other day was out of the 18 tabulators that they had, 2 of them, I believe, were dedicated for absentee ballot scanning through a county board.
Okay. So,
and I will add, in this scenario, there is no connectivity of any kind. We were mixing digital adjudication when you're doing digital adjudication, but in the scenario that we are talking about now, as it pertains to your county or Antrim County, there is no internet connectivity at all.
okay, thank you. But it does open up kind of the can for the other, major thing that we've talked about, where obviously in TCF, they were using digital adjudication.
Well, let's come back to that in a second. I just want to clarify one thing. So the reason why we don't need adjudication for in-person voting, that is if a voter made the same mistake in a local precinct where they are in person, the voter has the tabulator will prompt the voter about their error and offer the voter a second chance to correct their ballot. So in a hand marked paper ballot scenario, if the voter selects your name and then crosses or fills in the oval beside your name, and then crosses it out and fills in an oval below your name in the same contest, and it was only a vote for one contest, they're the ones that in-person voting, the voter themselves is feeding their ballot in the tabulator, and the tabulator will prompt them of their mistake, so they have a chance to correct it themselves. You don't need an adjudication panel because the voter can correct it for themselves. The issue arises in absentee voting, where the ballot has been now separated from the voter because it has been sent through the mail. And we are without the adjudication process, you're not giving that voter the same chance. So it's obviously different, but the states that allow it have very strict rules and offer guidance to the bipartisan adjudication panels of what they are and aren't allowed to do per state and local law.
Thank you. In the situations where they choose to use digital adjudication, such as at TCF or other mostly larger counties, and a computer then is local area network connected to the tabulator, what is you answered earlier, it's up to the locals to provide the security, but if they were to allow that computer to be connected to outside networks, does that present a vulnerability to the tabulator's programming?
Well, the system, as I said, is designed not to be connected. So if they're running certified software on those systems that are not connected to the internet, the record of what the adjudication panel is doing gets appended to the original ballot image, and they are available for audit. So these are questions best answered by the election officials that work to secure that location. Because you can imagine conceptually, that's just as dangerous as not having control of your in-person voting precinct. Back to the example of your home county. If you didn't trust the poll worker and you didn't trust all of the bipartisan watchers, that speaks to the security of the overall process, not to the accuracy of the tabulators. As I've said in my opening statement, the true test of a tabulation system such as ours is in the manual recount and an audit that is taking place. And that is something that is always available to do.
And I guess what I'm trying to come back to, because we started off with this question about logging of security. And so would outside manipulation, if somebody had these things connected, and obviously that's not the case in Antrim County, but potentially, possibly the case in other counties, would those security logs represent if somebody were to attempt some manipulation?
Well, certainly not. I don't think so. That's really a question for election investigators. I'm not aware of anything that has been found to be credible. But as I said, this really is a question for the officials that control the physical custody of the ballots. Our machines are responsible for the accuracy in regards to counting the paper ballots, and that's exactly what they do.
In the Antrim, back to Antrim, and I know we're bouncing around. In Antrim County, the report says that there is a period of time where there isn't any security logs. What is the explanation for that? So,
Senator, I've only had a cursory review of what I consider the biased and report that came up. I've also had a chance to cursory review, I should say, of the Secretary of State's response, which I frankly agree with the response that was issued recently to that report. As I've mentioned earlier, Dominion did not program Antrim County. We have no access to their systems. We are still not in possession of any of the logs or any of the databases or any of the election material from Antrim County. And so, as I said, a lot of the arguments were incomprehensible to me, but then again, I haven't seen any of the files, so I can't comment on what it is they're looking for, other than I know some of the conclusions were wrong and false.
Okay. Senator Tice has some questions.
Hello there. Thank you for being with us today. I very much appreciate that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So there's a lot of confusion. I want to start with Antrim. I know we've been over it, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but because there's so much confusion, I want to clarify it for people who haven't been there and for who don't understand what the process was that happened. So when a clerk is getting ready to do an election, she's bringing in all of the information for all of the things that are going to go on the ballot. And there's a lot of things, and it's unique all the way down to the precinct, because we have precinct delegates. So it goes all the way down to that level. And so it's very, very specific. And so they get all of that information, and then they lock the election. And that's when the ballots can start to get printed and all the testing can be done. And at the point that it was locked, there was a realization, and you spoke to this, correct? That there was a candidate that they found that was left off. You said it was a school board member. I thought that she had testified that it was a township, or no, a village trustee, but not sure which it was. Anyway, it was.
Could very well be correct. I'm not sure on exactly what was. All I know is the programming changed on.
Correct.
On ballots that affected 3 precincts.
And I thought maybe there was something else like a millage or something else too, but nonetheless, it would have changed the format of the ballot once they were reprinted. It would have looked different even. There would have been additional information on the ballot that hadn't existed there previously. So for that particular precinct, it looked different. Would that have affected outside areas beyond that precinct such that all of it needed to be reprogrammed? My understanding was it did. Is that true? So the
Okay,
entire
so-
county needed to be reprogrammed for the tabulators, not just the one precinct. Is that correct?
Well, I'll try to answer it this way. You're correct when you say that the election was locked. My understanding is that was sometime in September. And the ballots had PDFs generated for final sign-off by county officials. And once that sign-off occurred, ballots were printed. And I believe the ballots were then in custody of the county. Whatever the change is, whether it was a candidate or an addition of a contest, to the best of my understanding, the change, as it would be noticed by a voter, and I'll say it as simply as I can. The voting information, meaning the contests and the candidates in each contest, were only different after the change in ballots that affected 3 precincts, which corresponded to 3 tabulators. The issue on how the people that were programming the election, as I understand it, because it wasn't our company, but I have a good understanding of this, and it's going to be apparent why they did it this way. They updated the election project to correctly identify what the extra candidate, the extra contest, whatever it was. But care was taken to make the ballots that were printed and in possession of the county for the other 15 tabulators, care was taken to make them exactly the same. And the way there's a good reason for that. This feature exists because a lot of jurisdictions have the requirement where there might be a last minute court order to remove a candidate or to add a candidate, and it's simply impossible to reprogram thousands of machines overnight from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. So this is why the feature exists. In this case, it was deployed to save the ballot printing of what was already in possession. So again, best of my understanding, they only really had to destroy ballots, the blank ballots that were set to go for 3 tabulators, and they only reprinted the ballots associated with the change. Now, where the error happened was as I said, there was 2 different human errors that were compounded by the way that it was programmed. So the first error, there was instructions given, as I understand it, to reburn all 18 memory cards for each of the tabulators. I don't think this happened. So that was the first mistake.
She testified that it did not.
Right. The second, it's clear that I'm assuming, I shouldn't say it's clear. I'm making the assumption that a public logic and accuracy test was not performed at that point, because had it had been, the change would have been noticed, or the error would have been noticed. So specifically, to the best of my knowledge, of the 18 machines, some were running September project and some are running October project, and some of the ballots were September ballots and some of them are October ballots. So a couple things. Normally, if programmed in a usual way, the September memory cards would not have been allowed to be uploaded into our results and tally application. And this is the part of the application after the memory cards get securely transmitted, often with a sheriff, back to the central location, and those cards are uploaded, and the results are compared to the actual printout from the tabulators. So normally the September cards would not have even been allowed to be uploaded, but because the care was taken to make this allowable, they were. And so all 18 cards were able to be uploaded into the results and tally module. And that's where there was an error in the unofficial report. So as I mentioned, that's a very big reason why we do Canvas, or why election officials do Canvas. because that's where this was noticed, identified, and corrected long before results were made official.
So you've testified to all of this, but what you're doing is getting into the excruciating detail and making it extremely difficult to see the bigger picture for the people who are not accustomed to the detail of the tabulators. What I'm trying to do is to provide a picture for what this looks like from the voter's perspective and then from the outcome perspective. So without the proper programming and without the proper ballot, if I go in and feed that into the tabulator and the ballot that goes in is not the ballot that it expects to receive based on programming, then I'm going to have an outcome that is not an accurate outcome because the ballot isn't the accurate ballot that it's supposed to have, right? So we've added a contest. We've shifted stuff around. We're using September instead of October. There's something different with respect to it than it is expecting to receive. This isn't a Dominion thing. This is a programming thing. And so I'm trying to wrap my brain around what that would look like on the outcome perspective and how that would affect the numbers, because I'm feeding in one thing and it's trying to tabulate on something completely different. And I know that your system wouldn't allow this, but if I were to take something from precinct 8, walk it over to precinct 6 and feed it in, stuff wouldn't be in the right place. It wouldn't have the right questions on the ballot. And so as it tried to tabulate it, it would attribute the wrong numbers to the wrong things, assuming it would take it, of course. And then I'd have the wrong numbers in the wrong place. It seems to me, in my non-election brain, that that's similar to what happened here. If you step out of the detail and you look at the frame, you look at the outcome, is that...
I think I understand, and I apologize for getting into the weeds. I'm accused of that quite often, actually. But if you look at it from a 30,000-foot level, from the best of my understanding, we have some tabulators that were programmed for September that were fed September ballots. And we have some tabulators that were programmed for October with October ballots. As long as the October ballots were read by the October memory cards and the September cards were reading September ballots, the result tape from the tabulator would be correct. And I believe this is exactly what happened. To the extent that there was one location and one tabulator that was using a September memory card with October ballots, and it had this extra person or contest, that is, there wouldn't be any changes to the top of the ballot contests, but there very well may be a change to the affected race. And to my knowledge, that's precisely why the Secretary of State's office, together with Antrim County officials, are working to do a 100% audit on the presidential race to confirm that the results on the tape actually match 100% the results of the paper ballots, which of course had been securely stored under the custody of the local election officials.
So that is not my understanding of how that whole process worked, and it doesn't, the numbers that we saw should not have been affected at the top of the ticket for stuff that was going on at the bottom of the ticket. Now, what I had in my head for how that happened is you've just completely come back with something different than what I expected to hear. So can you explain to me how the top of the ticket numbers would have been affected by bottom of the ticket changes with what you just told me?
Okay. So we have two sets of results. We have the result tapes that are printed at the poll at the end of the election at polls close. And that is a thermal tape that has the results in the tally and the number of ballots that correspond to the number of ballots in the ballot box. Mm-hmm. We're good on that. So we call those tabulator results from the printout. Then we have the centralized computer that is designed to amalgamate and tally the results from all of the 18 tabulators together in a way that it can be reported easily from the county to, let's say, the Secretary of State's office or the media. So what I just said is in particular regards to the tabulator results. This is the printout that happened. There was multiple printouts at the close of poll at the end of election day. One was posted publicly in whatever building each tabulator was in. Multiple copies would have been handed out, and we have those results. And as long as September ballots were fed into machines that had memory cards programmed from the September project, those results will be 100% accurate. And as long as the tabulators that featured the cards from the October programming had October ballots fed through them, those tapes would be 100% accurate. When those cards then got driven in to the central location and they were inserted into a desktop computer, our tally server that the county has in their sole possession and control, the September cards should not have even been allowed to download the results if it was programmed in a regular way. The only way, and this is what confounded the two human error issues, because the programming was allowed to accept on the back end, on the tally computer, that tally computer was instructed to read cards from the September project and the October project. And that is where the reporting error from the night of the election through to the next morning at some point, that is where the results were very off, because that database was expecting structures in different ways than they actually were given on those memory cards. And that is what confounded the problem. So the results were never validated. They were never certified. And that is exactly the process of Canvas and why they were caught the day after. Does that help in the explanation? Or
that does. So the tabulators, provided that they were accurately programmed for the particular ballots that were being fed into them, regardless of whether they were September or October, are fine. It's not until the point of time that we're bringing together all of the information from all of the separate tabulators into an individual where we're conglomerating all of the information. It's not until that point in time where we're mixing then the October and September election plans, you call them projects, where it becomes an issue. And that at some point there was an override from where September was forced in as well as the October that should not have been allowed. And that's what
correct.
Created the problem? Okay, thank you.
That does help. And I will add that we are confident that the top of the ticket, so the presidential race, was not affected on the tabulator results, the tapes from the 18 tabulators. But of course, this is going to be, the recount will be the ultimate judge of that.
So yes, thank you. That's good. I just wanted to clarify a few things. So EAC is something that we've been referencing a lot. That's the Election Assistance Commission. A lot of people would have no idea what that is.
Correct.
When you are talking about whether or not the clerk would choose to download different aspects of the software that's available, like ranked choice. I know we've been beating the dead horse, but let me keep going here for a second. I don't have a ton of confidence based on the history that's been happening that all of the correct software choices were made, and perhaps some inappropriate software downloads happened. Is that possible, or do you not even think that that's possible?
No, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
This is not some feature that can be accidentally turned on. It is a distinct module that starts with the election definition, and that leads to the way the ballot looks. So this is not some feature that can accidentally be turned on.
Okay. So That also helps me with some of the issues that I was wondering, because I was thinking that when the clerk realized her issue and there was no longer anybody there, would she have manually had to adjudicate the ballots because everybody had already left? But you're saying no, they could have gone, in fact, just with the tabulator tapes and counted them that way, but now they're going back and doing a manual to compare the tabulator tapes and the numbers to the manual ballots.
You've confused me on that one. Are we specifically talking about Antrim County?
Yes, just Antrim right now.
So again, any adjudication would have happened only on the absentee ballots that were mailed in.
Well,
So
it was my perspective that because this election had happened and then she realized her error after that, when these ballots had already been fed in, that something else would have had to happen, but you corrected me on that, so thank you.
Yeah, again, Antrim County did not and could not have used digital adjudication.
Got it.
And the manual adjudication would have been done prior to her closing the polls on the two tabulators that ultimately printed out a results tape.
Okay, thank you. And I want to shift a little bit. I want to clarify something. You keep talking about the bipartisan watchers for things that are ongoing. They're not always available in all areas, in all places. And in some places, they're easier to find than others. And so part of the issues that we're dealing with as an oversight committee is they weren't always available in order to make sure that everything was done in the forthright manner that you describe. And that's not your problem, but that is, it doesn't always happen that way. And we want to make sure that it does. Do you, so you have equipment that's the tabulators. Do you guys also provide the high-speed tabulators?
Yes, we do.
All right. They don't have, do they have a box that the ballots go into also, or are they accessible to you at both the beginning and the end of the scan?
Well, they're never accessible to Dominion staff.
I'm sorry, to the person handling them.
Right. They're accessible, they're always accessible. So any high-speed scanner, the way it works to get a high throughput speed, usually has a U-shape scan head to minimize the frequency of jams, especially with ballots that have been folded and passed through the mail twice and handled by a number of different individuals. So the ballots, there is an incoming tray and an outgoing tray.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I may have some further questions later. Let's see. Oh, I did want to ask if we could get from you, because you referenced the contracts and you're not sure what we have contracts with. I don't want the details of your contracts. That's between you and whomever you contract with. But I would like to know with whom you have contracts for our state. So I know you do with the state of Michigan, obviously Antrim County, but if we could get that information, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I don't think we have a contract with Antrim County, but we will certainly get that for you, Senator.
It could be that our counties are contracting with the state in order to have access to that too. That's possible. And then you said the on-site technical support is part of the contract generally when it happens.
I wouldn't say generally. It's definitely not out of the norm. It's just in a lot of places, it's a regular part of our process.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and patience with me. I appreciate it.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Chair McBroom. Thank you for being here. I'm going to go back to some of the technical questions, if you don't mind. Can you tell us what programming language is used and if it includes any database system?
Not off the top of my head, but that's something certainly I can get for you.
Okay, I would appreciate that. Can you walk us through the business logic of what happens when a ballot is processed? For example, if a database record is created or they are simply updating a counter?
In the case of our polling, our precinct tabulator, every time a ballot is fed through the machine, there's a number of checks that the software goes through to identify the ballot being a legitimate ballot and a ballot from this election. And then it goes through the processing of the ballot, and then everything, of course, is logged and saved.
Sir, to your knowledge, is it possible for somebody to change a record value either locally or remotely?
No, to my knowledge, it's not. And even if it were, there certainly wouldn't be able to do it undetected.
So it wouldn't leave like a log entry if it was possible? Would it leave any trail?
It would leave a trail. There would be a mismatch from the other card, and there's several checks and balances in the machine that can identify whether or not such a thing happened, which of course I don't think it can.
Okay, thank you. And this has become a big issue. Do you have any knowledge about the SolarWinds breach? Are you familiar with
Very
this at all?
limited.
Because
all I know is that we don't use the SolarWinds Orion package that was the subject of the DHS report from the 13th, I guess, yesterday.
Is it possible for somebody to insert a USB drive that could have manipulated the database or data or software? Is that possible to your knowledge?
In our tabulators? No, I don't think it's possible. And again, even at the central computer, even if it was, it would be detected.
I just have two more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Small towns in Wayne County adjudicated in Detroit or at the local precinct, and if so, how was the data transferred?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Last question. How do you electronically match voter to identity so the voter can vote, so we can catch it so they can't vote more than once?
Well, that's really a question
that
for the
a clerk
officials.
issue?
It's really a question for the election officials
Okay.
whose job it is to verify eligibility. It's not something we do.
Okay, yeah, I just thought I'd check that. Okay. I may have more questions, but for now, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Polis, I'm going to go back to a question that I've hit from a couple of different angles before, but I just want to be really clear that we're talking on the same wavelength here. If, whether it's at TCF or a facility that uses digital adjudication, where they have a tabulator connected in a closed network to a computer, if by accident or intent that computer is not secured properly and is also connected to a network, a wider network, is it possible for someone to maliciously and unknowing, without us knowing it, hack into the tabulator and alter the results?
No, I don't think that's possible. But again, even if it were, it would be detectable.
Can you share with us how it would be detectable? What are the assurances that we can have to that?
Well, what I would recommend would be an independent test authority to do the analysis from everything on looking at all of the structures and the audit logs of that computer and perform the battery of tests that they do. And I know that they offer this as post-election services to election officials all across the country, and verify definitively whether or not such a thing happened.
Does the software is it your design within the software that Dominion designs to keep security logs that would flag unauthorized alteration of the code?
Yes, absolutely. And there's also ways for election officials to check that. And with every ballot scan that we do when we're talking about digital adjudication, we actually have a audit mark appended to a version to the saved ballot image that can show to any concerned citizen, any voter, a clear understanding of what the ballot was that was scanned and how the tabulator interpreted that.
What's the trying to, how would we understand, would there be some sort of flagging that would happen, though, that would cause poll workers to look? Would an error message come up? Would the machinery stop working? Or would this only be caught if somebody were to perform an audit?
No, the machinery would stop working, and you could always check by going through the audit marked images of the ballots that were scanned.
And
that's above, and that's not even before we get into an independent verification from an ITA.
Now, the security of that computer that is hooked even to that local network or the digital adjudication, the security protocols that are put in place on there, does your company set a standard and provide instructions to the local workers on all of the security settings that that computer should have? Is that something that comes from the state of Michigan? Does it come preset? Where do those security standards and settings get placed, or who does them?
Well, all of the settings that are allowable for use as part of a federal certification are specifically specified in that certification. And in addition, layering on top of that, they have to be allowed by the state of Michigan during their process. Ultimately, the physical security of the entire system, including possession of the paper ballots themselves, and the scanners that do the high-speed scanning of absentee ballots, are all under the control of the local election official.
What can you tell us about the various documentaries, news reports, and other things, both right now, contemporary, ones that I've seen from even 10 years ago, that show university professors and professional hackers demonstrating how quickly they're able to compromise election tabulators?
Yeah, it's a great question, Chair McBroom. If you're referring to, for example, the one that I'm familiar with is, I think, the 7-minute hack. The researcher, the professor from, I believe, Princeton University, that originally published this video, or if it's a video, an article, he's one of, I think, 50 or so signatories on a letter that specifically addressed this election. And how they are completely different systems. So I have seen some of these videos that you're referencing. They reference legacy systems that were developed and installed prior to the EAC's VBSG 2005 standards. And they certainly were designed and deployed prior to a lot of the rigorous standards that we see across the states, specifically California certification, New York certification. And ultimately, I keep saying this: paper. The 7-minute hack, the databases on the old Access or whatever system that they were using back in 2000 didn't feature voter verifiable paper ballots. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, were the ballots securely stored, and you always have a copy of them, and they're distributed at your local counties under lock and key and sealed. That is, at the end of the day, how you can trust your election.
One of the things that's, particularly troubling from just a pure, easy, transparent process in Michigan's voting is the imbalance of poll books. And I understand that, that imbalance is not necessarily because of software or equipment, but is usually attributed to the poll workers and the handling of the ballots. But is that imbalance something that Dominion looks into, and in its post-election work and, would you say, autopsy? Does Dominion look at the imbalance of poll books and discuss with your customers whether any of that has to do with the tabulators and the software?
Chair McBroom, that's really a question for the election investigators, both at the county, at the state level. So again, I'm not aware of anything that has been found to be credible. As I mentioned in my opening statement, we really, our part of the process is very limited to providing tabulation technology so that poll workers can use that technology to accurately count paper ballots, which is what they do.
Senator Tice says she has a to-the-point question there. Please.
Just with respect to the poll books, I believe the entirety of our electronic poll books were designed by Michigan for Michigan and are unique to Michigan. They have nothing to do with Dominion.
Okay, thank you, Senator. I'd like us to take if you want to take a few quick questions, then we'll take a break, and then I think we'll be able to wrap up.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Lucido.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And this is interesting. I'm having a good time with this. It's hard to understand it, but does Dominion have any way to remotely access any of the information on any of the equipment or have remote access within the machines themselves?
No.
So there is no modem at all in these machines?
The only modem is the one that I described that has a very, very particular function on the precinct. And we do not have access to it, and nor can we modem into that machine.
Does anybody have access to the best of your knowledge?
No.
Okay, but it has what is it they call those, USB port on the machine. I saw it myself, right? What's the USB port?
I'm not sure which machine you're referring to.
I'm not sure
several of
either.
our
I didn't
machines
get a
have-
serial number, but there is USB ports on machines that you build, correct?
No, I don't mean to be facetious, Senator. What did the machine look like? Was it a touchscreen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, there is.
Okay.
And so that touchscreen is a ballot marking device. It does not tabulate votes.
So
It's just a pen. It's an expensive, fancy pen that allows for voters of any abilities, any physical ability, language ability, to privately and independently create a paper ballot that can be cast by them privately and independently.
So if there was no wireless modems included or deployed in Dominion machines or equipment, could someone, let's say a hacker, that's the best way I can say this, connect a modem to do something that should not be done, which is affect the vote?
Well, Senator, if we're talking about a polling place in Michigan, we're likely talking about two pieces of equipment that come from Dominion. One is that touchscreen that it sounds like that you've seen that does have a USB key that's obviously locked and sealed. And then there's another machine that is a paper scanner that sits atop a physically secure ballot box. As I said, the ballot marking device does not tabulate votes. It is nothing more than an electronic pen, if you will. A voter interfaces with that ballot marking device, but at the end of it walks away with a piece of paper that has a clear written summary of who that voter voted for. And that is the chance that the voter has to physically hold their ballot and to review their selections prior to casting it. So to my knowledge, a hacker, if they tried to put any kind of an external device on that VMD, it would fall upon the security of both the lock and the seal. So A, we'd know about it, and B, it's part of a polling location that has physical security of the poll workers and the poll watchers.
How would you know about it? You just said we would know about it, because that was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. Well, first of all,
do you have some kind of
election
signal?
officials would know about it.
Is there a signal that says air? Is there a signal that says there's a...
I'm sorry?
That didn't happen with the machinery that did it. It didn't stop the machine and said, don't accept the vote. It kept accepting votes.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think anyone has, no one is alleging that somebody broke in.
Okay, no, we're not saying,
and
No, don't get me wrong. No, we didn't say hack. We didn't say the word hack. But there was an error in, and it was a human error according to the clerk, which, let me get through these few questions. If you can't remotely access it, Dominion, what were these 2 employees or 3 employees or how many employees doing at the TCF Center? What were they doing there from your company?
So I think you started the question asking about Antrim County. We did not have any.
No, I want to withdraw.
employees.
I'll withdraw the question for time's consideration in your time, and I appreciate you coming. Be specific. What were they doing in Wayne County at the TCF Center that they were employed by Wayne County? That's what you said, right? They weren't employed by the Secretary of State, were they?
No, okay, so we're not talking about Antrim County anymore.
No.
We're only talking about TCF Center.
Right.
And we had 2, to my knowledge, we had 2 Dominion employees and 1 one-day contractor. So they're discharging their duty as directed by election officials. So specifically cleaning machines, answering technical questions from election officials, but it's always done at the direction of the election official. There are strict instructions those employees are not running the election, so they should never be confused with running the election.
I didn't.
It could be as simple as cleaning. One of the most common things is cleaning the glass read head of a high-speed scanner, because as you might imagine, when you're scanning tens of thousands of pieces of paper, it actually is a pretty dirty process, and flecks from the paper accumulate in the scanning bed of the scanner that needs to be cleaned properly.
Would there be any reason? Would there be any reason for these 2 individuals, as you've indicated, to employ any third parties to be there also?
To employ any third parties? You mean contractors? Well, one of them was
contractors, agents, anybody else.
So we contracted with one contractor who I believe testified to your House hearing.
So you have viewed these hearings online?
I have not seen all of the hearings. I've seen snippets. I've obviously seen the testimony from the contractor that we hired for a day.
And who was that one? What was the name of the contractor you hired for the day, so we have it for the record?
Melissa Carone, I believe.
Okay. And that was the only one that the 2 other contractors or the 2 other employees from Dominion hired, Ms. Corona, is that correct?
I believe her name was Ms. Carone. So of the 3 people that were there, sir, 2 of them were employees of Dominion, and one of them we hired as a one-day contractor.
Okay. And these 3 individuals, I'm going to ask, was there training involved with the 2 employees that went to the TCF Center? And was there an outline of delegation of duties in which they had when they went to the TCF Center? Meaning, did they go with, this is what the scope of work is, this is what you're going to be paid, and this is what you're going to carry out on behalf of Dominion?
Right. So specifically, the contractor was hired from the temp agency. And she was, for us, one of several thousand one-day contractors. Her role was really limited to a type 1 type of technician who provides, she would have been told how to clean the glass read heads, or at least she should have been. But really, the main job is flagging down if there's any questions in technical nature that election officials have to flag down one of the 2 Dominion engineers who were there who could answer the question.
Was there any tallies or any evaluations that went back to the company by these 2 employees from the TCF Center outlining what, if any, issues were raised at the TCF Center? Like an evaluation. I couldn't hear you.
I don't know, sir.
I couldn't hear you.
I said I don't know, sir.
Who would be the one that would be charged with that duty if you don't know? So we could get something back as far as feedback go, what they claim happened at the TCF Center. Because we heard a lot of testimony,
I can certainly gather that for you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, there was only one question. It was doing with jamming of the machine. Does the tabulators, if a machine jams, go ahead and recalculate if the vote was already counted?
Are you referring to the central scanners that were at the TCF Center?
I am. We heard testimony that they have to go through batches. And if the batches are not deleted when they scan and it gets jammed up, the system then will run a ballot 2 and 3 times or 10 times through. This was the testimony, Mr. Polis, that we heard. I'm asking you, because you build a machine, if the machine itself is jamming and it doesn't then tabulate, or it jams it up and somebody pulls a ballot out, how do you know in the machine if it already calculated that ballot?
Yeah, I did see the testimony, and from my recollection, if there were ballots that were scanned multiple times, the audit would be off from the voter registration and the poll book records as part of the canvass process.
Why don't we stop right there, Mr. Chairman? I want to pick up that end about the poll being off so that we can see the process.
That sounds good to me. We'll take one last break, come back and finish up. Thank you, Mr. Polis. The committee is
great.
recessed for 10 minutes.
Thank you.